Good morning, everyone, and a really, really warm welcome to you all for our annual CEO conference. The fifth of its kind, incredibly, and half a decade of bringing together this vibrant, diverse network. In the current, ever-changing world, it's nice to be able to have some stability and some certainty, but more on that later on. I'm delighted to see so many of you here with us today. So many familiar faces, as well as some new ones too. So welcome. As we come together to talk about hope. Hope not just for ourselves, but also for our staff and our young people and the communities at a time of great challenge and change. At last year's conference, Michael commented that 2 years prior, who would have known what awaited us? And I think we can be safe in saying now that we can say the same again, but through a different lens. A lens of political and wider societal change and uncertainty. A context that I think is requiring most of us to dig very deep to be able to find a way to think for better. Having come most of the way through the pandemic of 2020 and 2021, we've quickly been met with further challenges, and it has at times undoubtedly felt relentless. But as CEOs, you are, of course, no strangers to challenge and change. I'm sure most of you could give me a long list of very tough situations that you've faced and somehow found a way through. It comes with the territory, to a certain extent. But I think we also have to recognise that after years of continual crisis leadership, this all feels a little bit different, and it feels like something needs to give, particularly when we consider the cost pressures you're enduring. We've done some very recent research with our partners at the Key, which is on your tables today, to look at the cost of living pressures facing our members. And this has given us some really interesting findings to share with you today. One of which is that the vast majority of those responding, which is around 94%, said that the cost of living increase is impacting their trust's work. Now, this is perhaps quite an unsurprising finding in itself, but it's huge in terms of considering the magnitude of the impact this is having with you all. Much like the pandemic of the last couple of years, this is yet another crisis brought about through no fault of your own, and yet all of you are left with the responsibility for dealing with the impact head on. I know from my recent trust visits and through individual conversations with many of you that you are now having to reconcile the deep sense of service and commitment that you feel to your communities and staff with having to make some unimaginably hard decisions yet again. And I know that this is deeply tough for you all, shouldering all the accountability with very little of the control, finding yourselves in constant crisis mode without the cognitive room to be strategic and address the long-term challenges and opportunities for children and young people. And yet many of you are miraculously managing to do it all. But as I asked in a recent article for the TESS, for how long? How long will it be until this constant crisis mode leads to its own national leadership crisis when we see more and more leave the profession? We're already seeing this elsewhere. Recent research from Korn Ferry looked at the sectors in the US with the highest leaving rates for CEOs. 174 non-profit and government sector CEOs, including the CEOs of food banks, hospitals, and schools, left their posts in the first 6 months of 2022, a 39% jump from the same period in 2021. Crisis and politics being the most cited reasons for doing so. Last year, a report found that 2/5 of school leaders plan to leave the profession for reasons other than full retirement within the next 5 years. The vast majority, which was around 9 in 10, stated the pandemic had either been the main factor or a contributing factor for their career decision. Meanwhile, a report from the NAHT earlier this year found that following the pandemic, fewer school leaders aspire to headship than ever before. Indeed, more than half of assistant and deputy heads say they do not aspire to headship anymore. This is troubling data, and yet it is the reality that needs to be faced. We have been saying through every route possible recently that education and those who lead and deliver it cannot and should not be seen as a cost to this country, but as a vital investment in its future. At Forum Strategy, we've been unwavering in this message to the government and clear on its urgency to be addressed. And it is good to see some help on the way for now through the Energy Bill Relief Scheme. Investment from the government in education is undoubtedly wise, because the solutions to many of the issues prevalent within our children and young people are in this room today. Addressing the attainment gap, ensuring a platform for young people's health, happiness and well-being, modelling leadership and actions that address the climate crisis and that fosters equality and inclusivity. These are all solutions and more that can be driven forwards by your organisations. And that is what gives me hope more than anything else. The power of leadership and the power of the people represented in this room collectively is astonishing. Indeed, in my visits to the Trust this summer, such as Embark, Lionheart, Victoria, Tudor Grange and Greenwood, I have seen hope manifest in practice and in action. Driven by CEOs who empower and support their organisations to flourish, and I hope to visit many more CEOs and trusts over the coming year. As you all know, we have long been advocates at Forum Strategy for you as leaders to set your own path and your own direction, not to wait for government directives that may not come or will change at last minute. There were some incredible examples of you doing exactly this at our recent roundtable on the cost of living pressures, finding ways to drive out efficiencies where it's humanly possible. However, as well as your own autonomy and power as leaders, we are also acutely aware that some fundamentals, such as funding, have to be forthcoming. And we want you to know we are committed to standing with you in continuing to call for the proper support for the sector. As CEOs, undoubtedly, you are cognizant of the need now to lead through continually volatile times. Something which our National CEO Network Chair, Sir Steve Lancashire, has recently touched on in his blog for us, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. But that doesn't mean accepting things as they are and not hoping for and working to drive change. And so we come on to hope and its undeniable link to leadership. Hopeful leadership, rooted in collaboration and professional support networks, is so important during these times. This is what this CEO network is all about, and it has been for a half-decade now. Consistency of collaboration. And so I cannot think of a better time to bring you all together as leaders from across the country to reaffirm that collaboration and to generate hope. Indeed, thinking not only about how you keep the hope alive for yourselves, but how you act as generators for those around you to keep going and to keep hoping for better. But as we consider what hope is, I'm aware that it means many different things to many different people. But for me, having a psychology background, I like this more clinical take on it from Arizona State University, and I like it because it defines hope as intentional. In psychology, hope is a cognitive practice that involves the intentional act of setting goals and working towards them with purpose. Optimistic people see the glass as half full, but hopeful people ask how they can fill the glass to full. This definition to me implies that while optimism is the attitude, hope is the vehicle that helps us to deliver something. It's intentional. So let us be intentional in coming together today, in sharing our own experiences of hope and listening to other people's experiences of hope too. And let us share the intention to take away this energy that today will undoubtedly generate to our loved ones, our colleagues, and the communities that we deeply care about and serve. Let us consider not just how we fill our own glass, but how we help to top others up too. The hope and sense of collaboration and support that can be generated through today's range of incredible speakers and your deep connections as colleagues and friends can send ripples through the system. And I hope will lift us all at a time when I'm sure we all need some lifting. And as for stability and continuity, which I did say I would return to, let me just end with this. At Forum Strategy, we're here for you. We have been here for you for the last 9 years or so, and we will remain here for you. And I can also say with confidence, we will be here for you in the years that come, whatever that may hold. There can, of course, be no promises that the tough times won't keep coming. But as a CEO network, you now have the support and the stability to weather these storms together. Alone, we are strong, but together, we are definitely stronger. Thank you.